fake it till you make it. You can't.
Especially when I'm on TikTok, I cannot watch more than 10-second videos.
I learned how to speed it up.
No. Hello everyone, I'm happy to welcome you for the LCC Podcast, and today's topic is very relevant and interesting not only for the students but also in general for the people working in leadership positions or working as CEOs in the companies. So it's about public speaking, and today's guest is also very specialized in public speaking, so maybe you could introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Oleksandra or Sasha, and I am a teacher here. I teach public speaking and arts and culture at LCC International University.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation to join our podcast, which is really fresh and new.
Thank you for having me.
So I just want to say that you have been a teacher for public speaking for a while now at LCC. So I had this question: how did you decide to become a teacher for public speaking? And maybe in general, what are your methods of teaching this specific course?
It's something that I was kind of interested in, and a colleague of mine that was also my friend, she was the person that was teaching using this specific methodology before I replaced her, and she was about to leave. So I was observing her, I was coming to her classes to take as much from her as I could to then bring it to my classroom, and I really liked her specific methodology where it's a lot more practice. There are lectures, there are things to learn, but there's a lot more practice, and that's what I appreciated as opposed to some of the other ways of teaching this class. So it was something like a passion of mine, an interest of mine, and I decided to get involved. So I kind of asked for it, and I was happy that it happened.
Yeah, I heard so many students saying that they really love your class for public speaking, and I think that's the point of public speaking. It should be practical. You cannot just have a theory about how to talk in front of people, but you have to practice and make speeches. And I had a question. When people come to public speaking, they do have some fears and concerns how it's going to look like. So what's one of the biggest misconceptions people have about public speaking, and how the students that they have fear, for example, for public speaking, how we can challenge it?
Well, I think the greatest fear, obviously, I guess, is just to get out there and to start speaking in public, because a lot of people are anxious. And it's so interesting because I've met people who are extremely outgoing, like in person, outside of the classroom, life of the party type of person. And then they come out here on stage acting completely nervous, right? And it's such a big difference. And I feel like it's just being kind of put on the spotlight being on you, and you have to face the audience. That's already a fear that a lot of people have. But also I think people expect perfection, out of themselves, right? And you kind of naturally want to be the best at everything you do, but this doesn't come when you just start practicing something, right? So I feel like you should never expect perfection. You should always strive to do well, but perfectionism is kind of something that I think messes things up for a lot of people. Yeah.
But there's the thing I agree. And I also had public speaking class, and I remember that whenever I was having speeches, whenever I'm making eye contact, that's the point where I get the fear of talking. But I agree that while you practice more, you get a skill. In your opinion, what is the most important element of a speech? Because the story should also be interesting, or how we deliver, or maybe the way we connect with the audience.
I think it's kind of a combination of a lot of things. It's first of all a good story to tell, and it has to be like a very nicely written script, right? Then it has to be your confidence, right? Like your body language, the way you present yourself, perhaps, the lack of distracting habits, or a lot of filler or whatever. And then I think it has to be a conversation between you as a presenter and then your audience. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to ask them a question and expect their response. It's just the consistent eye contact that lets you understand, okay, the audience is following me, or the audience is confused, and I have to help them understand me better.
But the story, does the story play an important factor in a good speech? Because I've watched a lot of TED Talks, and I realized that, I also saw that most of the topics for TEDx and TED Talk, they should be relevant to audience, more depression or studying abroad or just anything that is relevant to people. So the story plays a key factor, right, in each speech.
Oh, absolutely. Because a person, first of all, as you said, they have to find it relevant, because how are you going to capture the attention of the viewer if, let's say, the topic that you are presenting on is only interesting for you, right? Like you have to kind of, even if you don't know the audience necessarily, you kind of have to estimate, okay, that's what's relevant for this age group in this particular part of the world, let's say, right? So it has to be a relevant story, one that they can learn something from, one that will motivate them or persuade them to change something about their lives. So absolutely, it has to be a relevant, interesting story to tell.
Is there a specific timeline for a good speech? Because, I wouldn't say they get bored, but at least like 10 or 15 minutes speeches become a little bit boring. So do you think if there is a specific, that you set for your students, a specific timeline to make your speech like this?
I feel like it depends on the topic, right? Like, or it depends on the purpose of the speech, because you can tell a good short story in like 3 to 4 minutes, right? But then when it comes to the more serious things, like if you want to teach an audience something, or if you want to persuade them or motivate them, this is where it might take you longer. But honestly, I would say no longer than 10 minutes for anything, right? Like, because even when I notice teaching this class for a while now, I noticed that with the last speech, that's like 8 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes, right? That's when already you can feel that people are perhaps struggling to keep focused. And that's maybe because we're now exposed to these short videos all the time. And the attention span does get kind of smaller. Yeah.
Especially when I'm on TikTok. I cannot watch more than 10-second videos.
I learned how to speed it up.
I didn't know about it, even though I'm chronically online. I know what TikTok is, but I didn't know how to like put on speed, but now I do it. And I have also a question about the story, because people don't like fake stories. Like when you present, it's not authentic and not like natural. So you think it's also important, like when a speaker presents themselves, like in a very like, I'm open, I'm welcoming, my story is natural. Like it's also a factor, right, for a good.
And that's what I try to tell my students in class, that a good, especially if it's like let's say your purpose is not to educate, right? But your purpose is to tell a story. A good story has to be personal, right? Like it's an experience that you lived through, or perhaps a very close person has lived through that you then learn something from, right? Like, because if you start, well, first of all, a lot of times it's really obvious when you're trying to make things up, exaggerate them, make them more sensational, right? Like you can play it up a little, right? Like just for the dramatic effect, but not fake it. So of course, like a good story has to be personal, because you yourself are then invested, right? Like, and it's easier for you, and it's more interesting and pleasant for the audience to hear a story like this.
I think I agree, because I when I had my speeches, it was like 2 or 3 minutes. I tried my best to take from my life, anything that is from my life, and that to make it more interesting for the people. I also think that what I've noticed at the TED Talk is that they always present with the presentations. So do you think today's speeches, they also need to have visual communication? Because people, as we say, they have span of attention, they get bored too early. So do you think if those presentations and pictures can keep them like watching and hearing the speech?
Yeah, I think and first of all, you kind of have to keep in mind there are these different types of learners. Some people are like visual learners, others do like auditory or whatever it's called, right? Like through their hearing, some are through reading. So I feel like a good combination of everything, a little bit of text, like key points, a good visual, as well as your speech. And again, depending on the purpose, right, can really be helpful. Even if you're just telling a story from your life, like I just had speeches today in class, and some people, while telling their personal stories, they would have just a picture up, and that helps the audience, because everybody's using their imagination to imagine, the events unfolding. So to give them a visual, this is what the characters in the story look like, or that's the setting, right? Like I feel like that's really helpful.
I think even if you just have a photo, you can just make a good connection and a good background for that photo, and just like go for like 10 minutes just to give for a good speech. So you said also that body language plays an important role in speeches. So basically a person cannot just stand in front of an audience and just do nothing with the body. Like it needs to move most of the time, because that's what makes the audience interested, right? So body language is a key role.
Yeah, because that's probably the primary indicator that, let's say, you're nervous or you're feeling comfortable, right? Like, because when a person is anxious and nervous, you can't control a lot of those like little body movements, and it's very different for everybody. You know, somebody can be touching their hair or like moving, you know, in a very like repetitive way from one side to another, like while still being standing, you know, in one place. And it's, or like, you know, messing with their jewelry or whatever, right? So like it's very different for everybody, but that's a dead giveaway. Like right away, they're nervous. When somebody is confident, you know, they do say you kind of have this like open body, you know, pose, I guess, and you're standing, your feet like shoulder width apart, you know, like very open body language. You can definitely add some gestures, right? Like with your hands, and there are different kinds, right? Like depending on the situation, but that you want to show confidence and just appearing comfortable, I guess. That's what you want to try to do with your body language. And that's, you know, and if you are, and I'm willing to bet that a lot of even of the more, you know, skilled public speakers are probably still very anxious, but you got to learn to, well, through rehearsals and through practice, to teach yourself to not do those distracting habits to show that you are nervous.
I think even walking is it good when you just like walk around the stage and present?
You want to use your space well, right? So like, and you can watch, like I show in class also, and I've borrowed this from Ksenia. There's a speech to analyze, right? And there's a woman at this motivational speaking competition, I think, or it's just a general public speaking competition, but she's giving a motivational speech, and she's like kind of pacing around the stage, but that's very appropriate because she's kind of showing stages through her life, you know? And that, I think, is very helpful. So she's kind of starting from one edge of the stage and then moving towards the next. And it really makes sense. So if you manage to use the space appropriately, absolutely. Like, you don't want to be walking back and forth like you're talking on the... You remember, like, there used to be those, like, landline phones with whatever, this curly kind of wire. So you don't want to be walking back and forth while you're kind of planted, you know, to the same location and just pace around. But you can walk around if it...
I think audience will get bored at that point if you will just like get too much, give too much.
You don't want to make it weird.
No, for real. I think I also had a question about speech itself. So what do you think, what I've taught during my class for public speaking is that what you say the last, that's what people remember the most. So is it like that whenever you say the last, like the last sentence or the last motivational quote, it's going to hit the audience?
So we always say it has to be a very strong first sentence or a few, right? To make that impression right away, to get that connection established. Yeah, exactly, right? And I mean, your last sentence or a few, right? Like, you want to leave a lasting impression. You want your audience to remember what you said and walk away from the classroom, from the event, from, you know, whatever, remembering that specific thing. So like whatever takeaway. So absolutely, like, you have to make it count. Your very last sentence or the last two sentences, depending on, you know, what you want to say, have to be memorable for sure.
Yeah. I think most of my speeches that I was doing for my public speaking class is that I was trying, like, I was kind of not saying the most important stuff. I was leaving for the last time so that like my professor were like, okay, I like that. Good, great. I love the ending, so good, great.
And, you know, especially when a speech is like 8 minutes long, you know, a lot of the things that were in the middle, you'll kind of forget, but then you'll be like, oh.
And then you somehow reconnect it to what the person said in the middle, so you're like, it makes sense for them. Do you have like any tips that you give them?
Well, I only ask them when they practice and when they rehearse. Do it with a friend, like do it in front of a mirror. If you see that there are like mistakes that you keep repeating, let's say that distracting sort of body language, or if it's, you know, a line that you trip over all the time, or if you do have a lot of those filler words, right? The only way to get rid of them is just through continuous practice. So there's really not much you can do except just to try to get comfortable. And I mean, we are lucky here in the sense in the classroom that we're practicing and we know the audience already. So they do become gradually more and more comfortable. But if you're there giving a TED Talk, that's a little different, right? So rehearsals, practice, that's the only thing.
For me, like, what I've noticed is that even if I do a lot of rehearsals, still, like, when it comes to that point, it's scary. It's hella scary for me to just, not scary, but it's like when I see, that's the thing, eye contact for me, it's like the hardest thing. It's just that I'm looking at it and they look at me, I'm like, no, I'm scared, I'm not going to look at you anymore.
But, you know, like, what I also try to tell my students is, let's say you're here messing up your speech. the only person that knows you're messing up is you, right? So unless you really start getting so scared that you are like clear panic, your body gets stiff and you're like, looking around, you don't know what to do. Yeah, like that's when the audience will know and everybody's going to be like, sheesh, like they're going to talk about it when you leave the classroom. But if you don't let that show, and some people, like some students I've met through this class are just so good at like improvising on the spot when they I can tell like they forgot because I've seen their scripts also, right? Like, so I can tell something is going off the script, but they kind of make it so seamless, that you can't even tell that they forgot. So just to try to not show it to your audience.
That's the thing. I think improvisation is a key part in speeches because it's not like you're gonna remember by heart everything you wrote. And even though like I did write all of my speeches, I think it just at some point it's just like you want to bring this up, and then like it just goes flow.
And that's why I kind of try to dedicate quite a bit of the class to like improvisational exercises, because you have to, you don't have a lot of time to think, right? Especially in a situation like this where you're feeling like, oh my goodness, I can't remember. You have to try to, kind of start speaking on the spot. So you already know your topic, right? Or usually the improvisational exercises, they're quite simple, right? Like nobody's asking you to explain rocket science, when you're put on the spot. So in this case, you know your topic. You should be able to kind of gather whatever facts and information you have to keep going. And in class, when you do improvisation, you should get comfortable to just start yapping, right? Like on any given topic without much preparation, right? So it's incredibly important to be comfortable to just make things up. Fake it till you make it. You can't.
Exactly. That's the phrase that I'm living. You make it till you. I love public speaking. I love presenting, and for me, it's mostly about visual. Like whenever I talk, I do need to have something. But what I noticed is that, do you think, like when it comes to visual public speaking, photos, when people show statistics, so like, is it interesting? Should they show statistics?
I don't know that it's very interesting, right? But sometimes, and I don't know that your audience is necessarily looking to see the statistics, right? But depending on your topic, depending on what you're trying to show or educate on or prove, you have to have good support, right? Like you have to have good resources. So sometimes, there's research out there and you're trying to show, oh, this is the percentage of people that do this as opposed to that don't, right? Like, and maybe you want to convince them to do otherwise, right? So it's good to show them a good statistic to illustrate the point. And a lot of times, like, visuals are striking and memorable, right? So a person might not realize until you show them, what do they call, like pie charts, whatever, with like a big... Oh, yeah. Those, right? Like, and then they'll see, oh my God, really, that chunk of the circle is doing this, right? Like, and then it'd be like, wow, yeah. So numbers maybe don't, maybe people don't understand so like the numbers so well, or like the percentages or the statistics, right? But then you show them that
it's just like, wow, this many numbers.
Like, oh my goodness, look at that big piece of this circle, right? Like, I am one of them, and perhaps I should, let's say, quit smoking, and I don't want to be part of that majority, and I want to do the healthiest choices for myself, something like that, right? Like, so sometimes it's really helpful, I would say, especially to show that I've taken this from a credible source. This is up-to-date research, and I want to kind of put it out there.
So it leaves out like a big impression of like, if it's a big number, if a CEO is like, we did this, like in our company, just like the number is big. So it like the connection. Also about connection with audience. So I've noticed that like speakers love to interact with audience. Do you think every speech, for a successful speech, they need to have interactive part, like when you ask a question and then you go to like a audience, like, hey, like ask the question, like let's interact. Do you think?
I don't know that it's required with every speech, but we do want to have, like, we want to engage the audience. So whether you ask a rhetorical question that doesn't require a response or a real question that you want some people to kind of like give their answers to, I think it's helpful. It is engaging, right? Like it especially if you do it kind of later in the speech, in the middle of the speech, to kind of make sure that the audience keeps listening and that they're focused. So I think it's not a bad idea. It's maybe not appropriate for every single speech that you do, depending on the subject that you're discussing, but I think it's a good idea.
I think what worked for me is that when they ask the question at the beginning, you're like, do you know this is this? And then when people are like, okay, I'd never know about this, then I want to listen more, like figure out what he's talking about. So I think it's somehow, it can be inserted somewhere, but not like the whole speech is dedicated to interactive.
Just like one instance, right? Like one question to ask, or you can like make a little joke, and kind of point to somebody in the audience, right? Like to kind of keep this be a conversation, right? Like not just a one-sided monologue presentation.
Okay. I love that. No, I didn't take your classes, but I'm pretty sure that people love your classes.
Come visit.
Is it possible to just like come and visit? Yeah. Okay, I will come visit. So yeah, I think I love public speaking, and can you just like, as to wrap up the whole podcast for the episode, just like any tips for everyone presenting in front of their employees, people, even TED Talk? I don't know.
I would say do a lot of practice. Plan your speech. Don't leave it till the very last moment, right? Like create a little plan, write out your script, depending, I guess, on what you're doing, right? Don't rely on just improvising when it's something that's like a very serious matter, a life or death issue, a very important TED Talk, right? Like it's okay to leave some of the things kind of less structured, if there is an allowance for that. But for the more serious things, you have to rehearse and practice. You have to do anything that's possible and manageable for you to kind of become that confident person, at least on stage. You can take it as a performance, right? Learn how to act. Like you don't have to have, all the skills possible in the world to be that confident person in real life. But just for the moment that you're out there as a speaker, take it as a role that you're playing and just be as confident as you can. Like step, kind of, how do you step out of your shell? Is that the word?
Yeah, I'll say about like comfort zone.
Yeah. Like, kind of be the star for the moment. So I feel like confidence, practice, rehearsals, planning are very important for any type of speech you do. Yeah.
And I also wanted just to say that like we are gonna have our TEDx LCC very soon. Just like wanted to advertise, we're still gonna have it. So I think we're gonna have an amazing also part of faculty. We will have also some faculty and staff and students talking about their topics. So I'm very excited, and I will take this tip for sure because I love public speaking, and I'm not going to participate TEDx, but I do want to participate next year. And I do think when you're confident, when you practice in front of friends, in front of mirror, it gives you the confidence and the idea that you're going to present soon.
And I will try to be involved in this TEDx this time. So I'm here to help, with anything I can. So please ask your questions.
We do want any advices. Yeah. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed talking.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for accepting. And this was the episode dedicated to public speaking and how you can improve public speaking, challenge your fears. Thank you to Oleksandra Smoliar to joining and talking about public speaking. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And
thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. Then bye. Bye, everyone. Bye. So this was the podcast with Oleksandra Smoliar about public speaking. I hope that this episode of the LCC podcast was very educational and knowledgeable for us facing the fear of public speaking and in just general being scared of talking in front of a big audience. So I hope you got really nice tips and advices about how to conquer those challenges and do great when it comes to public speaking.